Good evening and welcome to Just the News. I'm Faye D'Souza. Let's get straight to it. The Supreme Court has decided to set up a 12-member national task force comprising of medical experts and doctors from across the country, along with the Cabinet Secretary of the Union Government as its convener. Now, this task force is meant to address issues relating to the streamlining of oxygen allocation to different states, to review and suggest measures to ensure availability of essential drugs and medicine. Remember, the Supreme Court has been hearing a case suo motu about the management of the COVID crisis across the country, and the question of our oxygen allocation to different states keeps coming up. This task force members include Dr. Bhabatosh Biswas, former Vice Chancellor of West Bengal University, Dr. Devendra Singh Rana, who is the chairperson of the Sir Gangaram Hospital in Delhi, Dr. Devi Shetty of Narayan Hridayalaya in Bangalore, Dr. Gagandeep Kang, who is a professor at CMC Vellore, who's incidentally also just given us an interview that's uploaded onto our YouTube page, Dr. J.V. Peter, also of Vellore, Dr. Naresh Trihan, we've heard him speak a lot of Medanta Hospital in Gurugram, and several other doctors, including Dr. Zarir Udvadia, who is from Hinduja Hospital, Breach Candy Hospital in Mumbai, and the Secretary of the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India. Now, explaining the rationale behind setting up this national task force, the court said the establishment of the task force is to enable decision makers to have inputs which go beyond finding ad hoc solutions to present problems. In the meantime, India has reported 4,187 COVID deaths in the last 24 hours. This is our worst tally so far, and it is the first time that we have reported more than 4,000 deaths in one day. Now, there have been, of course, questions about the manner in which these deaths are being calibrated and reported across the country, a suggestion that the actual number might be a lot higher than this. We've also reported over 4 lakh cases. The active caseload in India is now well over 37 lakh. Worst affected state remains Maharashtra, reporting 54,000 cases. Now, while Mumbai has shown a drop in the number of cases it's reporting on a daily basis, the rest of Maharashtra, including rural Maharashtra, seems to still have a very sharp problem. Karnataka and Kerala are next. Karnataka reporting 48,000 cases and Kerala 38,000 cases as of right now. The central government has in the meantime revised its national policy on admission into hospitals for COVID patients. The key takeaways are, first of all, you no longer need a COVID positive report or of an RT-PCR report in order to be admitted into a COVID hospital. If you have the symptoms, you can be admitted into the suspect ward of the hospital or the nursing home or the COVID care center. No patient is to be refused services, including oxygen or drugs that they need on any count. No patient is to be refused admission because they do not have a valid identification of the city in which the hospital is located, and beds should not be occupied by people who do not need hospitalization. Of course, the larger problem of refusing oxygen and drugs is from the shortage of supply. That issue is yet to be addressed. Now, in its editorial, the very respected medical journal Lancet, which is a global journal relied on heavily by the medical community, has written an editorial that has said that Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government seemed more intent on removing criticism on Twitter than trying to control the pandemic. It said that the Prime Minister's actions in attempting to stifle criticism and open discussion during the crisis were what it called inexcusable. The journal also quoted estimates that said that India will witness 1 million or 10 lakh deaths by August this year from COVID. Referring to this, the Lancet had said if that outcome were to happen, Modi's government would be responsible for presiding over a self-inflicted national catastrophe. End quote. The journal also went on to criticize India's vaccination program. It said the government had abruptly shifted course without discussing the change in policy with state governments, expanding the vaccination to everyone older than 18 years, draining supplies and creating mass confusion and a market for vaccine doses in which states and hospital systems competed with each other. The DRDO, or the Defense Research and Development Organization, has now developed a drug that has been approved by the Drug Controller General of India for emergency use in treatment of COVID. Now, the drug, after clinical trial results, has showed that a molecule present in the drug helps in faster recovery of hospitalized patients and reduces supplemental oxygen dependence. The drug, developed by DRDO and Hyderabad-based Dr. Reddy Laboratories. The drug comes in a powdered form in a sachet that is to be taken orally while after dissolving in water, and apparently it can be mass-produced without too much cost. In an interview with India Today, the managing director of Zydus Cadila, Dr. Sharvil Patel, has said the company's COVID vaccine, which is called Zycov-D, is very close to being approved in India. He said the company is likely to apply for emergency authorization this month. He also said that there was a largest number of participants in the trial of 28,000 volunteers who have been vaccinated as part of this trial. The recruitment holds very important milestones in terms of the fact that it included elderly people, those with comorbidities, and children in the age group of 12 to 17 years. Now, if approved, this will be our fourth vaccine, because we have Covishield, Covaxin, we have Sputnik 5, and now this new vaccine from Zydus Cadila. Zydus Cadila also has a drug that it had developed called Verafin, which was given emergency use, restricted emergency approval for treatment of mild cases of COVID as well. Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal has appealed to the central government to give the state of Delhi adequate number of vaccines, because it has existing stock to last only 5 or 6 days. He has said Delhi needs at least 2.6 crore doses. About 80 to 85 lakh doses are needed each month. If this is spread out over 3 months, they can vaccinate the entire population. The Orissa High Court has sought the central government's response in a plea seeking doorstep vaccination for elderly people, differently abled people, and others to be able who are unable to go to the vaccination centers because of ailments. Now, this comes after the Supreme Court questioned the central government on its plans to ensure rural socio-economic underprivileged classes in society are included in the vaccination drive. Remember, the Supreme Court asked, how will someone who is either illiterate and doesn't have access to the internet register themselves on the COVID website? The Supreme Court suggested doorstep vaccination for many of these people to avoid them traveling and picking up the infection by doing so. Now, the High Court order has said that it is possible to broadly interpret the expression of underprivileged to include those who are aged, who have disabilities or other reasons why they cannot travel to the vaccination center. The Government of India is to respond right now to the Orissa High Court. The Bombay High Court on Thursday asked why the Union Government and the State Government of Maharashtra did not publicize alternative drugs to the imported drugs that are currently being used to treat COVID patients. The Bombay High Court said, and I quote, "The reasons to popularize foreign medicines are obvious, but if we have alternatives, why not use the local medicines? It's right there. No one can be allowed to profit from the sale of essential drugs. It is you, the central government, and you, the state government. You have to put your foot down. India is not a country where foreign companies can make a profit like this." The bench was hearing a petition wherein they pointed out how patients were dying due to non-availability of drugs like tocilizumab and the favipiravir. The court noted that the Swiss company Roche that manufactures these drugs was also being marketed by Cipla in India. The court cited the Union government's affidavit to the Supreme Court, where the centre had claimed that domestically produced alternatives are equivalent, if not more effective. The central government has issued notice which will now allow hospitals and other medical facilities to accept cash payments of more than 2 lakh rupees from COVID patients' family members until the 31st of May. Family members will have to also present a copy of their PAN card or their Aadhaar card to make that payment. Now, remember, back in 2017, after demonetization, the government passed a law saying that no payment can be received in cash if it is above 2 lakh rupees. This was done to curb black money. The central government has now made an exception for people who are treating COVID patients, saying that these hospitals can accept cash payments in order to make things easier for family members making those payments. The central government has directed all state governments to prioritize in their vaccine drive beneficiaries who need their second dose right now. According to Additional Secretary for Health, they have said, and I quote, utilize supplies of vaccines through the Government of India channels 70-30 for the second dose and the first dose respectively. A regular review of coverage of COVID-19 vaccination drive to be undertaken to formulate and implement strategy of such prioritization. Now, the central government does still give some supplies to state governments to vaccinate people above the age of 45 and is giving some supply to vaccinate people below the age of 44, so 18 to 44. State governments are meant to actually source their own supply for the second category, but none of them have really managed to do so because most states have been told by the vaccine suppliers that they can't get their deliveries right now. So there have been, since 18 to 44 is also available at this point, there is a question of who to prioritize first. The state of Tamil Nadu has announced a complete lockdown of 2 weeks starting the 10th of May. All grocery and meat shops will function from 6 a.m. to 12 noon. Restaurants are allowed to stay open only for takeaway and home delivery. Hotels are allowed to open only for business visitors, although guests will have to be given food in their rooms. Inter-district and intra-district government and private bus services are prohibited. Taxi and auto services not allowed to operate. Those travelling for weddings or funerals will have to e-register. E-commerce services, except for delivery of food, is prohibited entirely. Tamil Nadu reported 26,000 cases and 197 deaths in the last 24 hours. In the first week of April, they were reporting 2,000 cases. It is now 26,000 cases per day. Taking a look now at news coming in from across the world. After the Joe Biden administration in the US's proposal to waive patents on COVID vaccines, Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla warned that this will set off a worldwide race for raw materials that threatens the safe and efficient manufacturing of COVID vaccines. Now, he said that entities with little or no experience in manufacturing vaccines are likely to chase the very raw materials that we require to scale our production, putting the safety and security of all at risk. Germany too had opposed the proposal. On the other hand, New Zealand, Russia and the European Union had supported it. News from the world of science and technology right now. Well, I don't know if you like bees, but this is an interesting piece of information. Dutch scientists have discovered that bees can detect COVID, and this is how they did apparently. They conducted an experiment where bees were rewarded with sugar water as a replacement for nectar every time they were shown samples of COVID. And they would not get the reward if it was a non-infected sample. Now, the bees were conditioned and they spontaneously apparently extended their tongues to receive their reward when given an infected sample. So by this now, Dutch scientists have concluded that these bees can be trained, to detect COVID. Now, this is interesting because currently it takes 24 hours to be able to detect COVID, or at least a few hours in some tests. On the other hand, bees can tell you immediately. But there are some critics who say people would rather prefer a diagnostic tool that doesn't sting them than using bees for that purpose. News from the world of sports at this point. The Football Super League drama continues. According to reports, FC Barcelona, Real Madrid and Juventus could all be banned from the Champions League. Now, 9 out of the 12 founding members of the breakaway league have backed away, but Barcelona, Madrid and Juventus are the only clubs yet to formally announce their backing away or to formally renounce the Super League. According to the Associated Press, the 3 rebel clubs have refused to accept the reintegration measures that have been proposed by the UEFA and will face disciplinary process. This process could include a ban from the premier competition, the Champions League. And a piece of positive news before we leave you for the weekend. Following a viral video of 10-year-old Vansh Singh, who was selling socks to support his family financially after he dropped out of school, Punjab Chief Minister Amrinder Singh called him and promised to help him. In the video, Vansh refused to take an extra 50 rupees from a customer who had shot that video about him. The Punjab Chief Minister has announced full financial support for Vansh's education, besides 2 lakh rupees in immediate assistance for the family. We're going to leave it there. Remember, stay home, stay safe. Details about this, about all of the stories that we have read out are available in the description of our YouTube page. Also, there have been many of you writing to me asking for us to put captions on our news in order to make it accessible for those people who are either hearing impaired or need the captions in some way. The captions have now been included starting today on the YouTube page. It makes it easier for us to do it on the YouTube page. So take a look at that and inform people who wanted the captions that that's a good way to access it as well on the YouTube page. If you have any other suggestions for us, do feel free to leave us a comment at the bottom of this video. Thank you so much for watching. Have a nice weekend.